It's no secret that there are some really horrible people on the internet. It's no secret that a lot of them are men. It's no secret that women can be subject to horrific abuse on the internet, but somehow there's something different that happens, at least for me, when you go from those abstract ideas to the specifics. I've just watched a video that shows the two sports reporters, Sarah Spain and Julie DeCaro, being confronted with men reading the words, not the men who wrote them, but some of the words directed against them. That video has gone viral. It is extremely upsetting. It's gone viral with the hashtag #MoreThanMean. And Sarah Spain joins us now to talk about that. She is a columnist with ESPNW. She is a host on ESPN Radio, and she is a Sports Center reporter for ESPN. So obviously she knows her sports. She works in the sports field. And Sarah, first of all, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Secondly, thanks for making this video. It cannot have been easy.
Yeah, it was funny. I had heard the kind of comments and emails and tweets that were featured in the video so many times that I sort of naively anticipated showing up and kind of just being used to it. But there is a certain sensation that is so different when you're actually looking at somebody saying the words to you. And the fact that the guys in the video were so affected by the words, having not seen them before, certainly made me kind of rehear them again and give the words some power that I think had been taken away after years of dealing with it.
Yeah, and I know I hear people say that, they feel like they've grown accustomed to it, but it must be somehow that on some level, even seeing it in writing as opposed to spoken, it must be in some way you never get. It must always take a toll on you. I'm thinking even if you're not conscious of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes sort of in droves. So if I write a particularly controversial, I guess is the word for it, even though I'm usually not writing things that are intentionally some sort of hot take. But if I write something, say, about Floyd Mayweather and how I think the Nevada Gaming Commission should reconsider allowing him to continue to fight when he has outstanding legal issues to deal with concerning domestic violence. If I write about domestic violence issues in the NFL, equal pay rights for women, any issue that might cause anger among certain groups of people, then it becomes an issue where I'm slogging through, dozens at a time. And then it's just not only exhausting, but it sort of makes you not feel like carrying on the conversation because you're not really interacting with people who want to discuss and debate. You're just getting attacked over and over. So yeah, what's unfortunate about it is I've been in the industry so long that I do have a thick skin and I can take it. But if I think about getting the kind of abuse that I get now back when I was starting, and if Twitter had been as much of an important platform when I was just getting started, I think it would have been really devastating to me when I was still needing confidence boosts and endorsements from fans and friends and coworkers. And that's really what I'm most concerned about is how can we kind of make this better so that girls that are coming up don't have to fight through this when they aren't yet equipped for it.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that, Sarah Spain. I want to also, by the way, I neither want to re-traumatize you, nor am I allowed by, broadcast rules to say some of the things that were said. But, there's B word, there's the C word, there's sexual degrading language of just almost inconceivable unless you just dwell in that kind of lower moral universe, I guess, for a living. But, let's go back a step, if you don't mind, Sarah. What made you become a sports reporter in the first place?
I grew up playing sports my whole life, and I ended up doing track and field in college as well. And I was always a huge fan. But I actually, after college, moved out to LA to do more comedy. I did the whole Second City Improv Conservatory. I was wanting to be on Saturday Night Live. And I still would love to do that. I think I'm getting a little long in the tooth to start any new industry paths. But as I was doing that, there weren't any women in sports that really got to be funny at the time, especially growing up. They were all very serious anchors or bubbly kind of sideline reporter types that would only get 2 minutes at a time and never really got to have opinions or show their personalities. So it just didn't seem like something that I could do. And then after being out in LA for a while and doing the sort of comedy acting route, I took a hosting class. And in the class, I just hosted a fake Chicago Bears show as a practice to, teases and ins and outs and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I should just do this. And I should do it the way that I want to. and I made the transition into sports. And as soon as I did, it really was just not instantaneous, but it was so quick how it just felt right. And the reaction that I got to my work was so much more on point. So I feel like I should have been doing it all along. But I like the fact that I took a kind of weird path because I think it influenced a lot of my work. Now I bring in a lot of the improv and the comedy and the entertainment side of it.
Yeah, and I want our listeners to know that there's a person on the receiving end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of this abuse. That it's not that it's not an abstraction. It's somebody who digs sports, who wanted to, talk about them, who talks and communicates. And I guess one of the things one of the points that you've made, and that I think is really important in talking about this, you've made several great points already just in this conversation. One being that we don't want to discourage some young girls coming up from getting into, frankly, this or any other public field because of this. We've had Gamergate in that world,
Yeah.
where women who comment about online games or electronic games are subject to enormous abuse too. I guess before we go to solutions, I mean, is this really? It seems to me, looking at the nature of the abuse, that this is really about consciously not only hatred of women and deep misogyny, but it's about trying to drive women out of a certain space. I mean, it's just basically somebody said, when I go to sports, I don't want to see women.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
basically about they want a guy place. And so, which to me is no different than wanting a whites only counter or any other form of bigotry and discrimination and segregation, and that they'll go to the ugliest means to make it happen. So I mean, it's hate and it's a desire to like drive women out of a place. But the impression I get, even just watching the video and then just talking to you for a couple minutes now, is you ain't going anywhere.
Yeah. It's not scaring me out of doing anything, but I will say when you're starting out, it makes it much harder to imagine yourself finding great success in a space that is sort of limited for women, and that there are a great number of people who still genuinely believe that women are incapable of participating. And there are radio hosts today that go on rants on their radio stations about how sports are not a space for women, and women aren't capable radio hosts, or they aren't capable of interacting with callers and taking questions, that they can be hosts but not opinionists. And for me, I think it's pretty obvious. We've had a lot of people respond to the video and say, everybody gets harassed online. Everybody gets treated poorly, men too. And we totally understand that. And that is true. But the difference is that usually it's for an opinion. It's because they don't agree that player's past his prime or that team is going to win 10 games next season. It's not, you do not deserve to have the right to talk about this. You were born a woman, and therefore you are incapable of being an expert or of having any room in this space. And I think I do compare it a lot without being able to speak on their behalf, to LGBT, to Muslim, to African American, to anybody who has been told that they are not allowed in a space purely for being born as they are. And it's something that I've talked about a lot in actually some of my writing, because I do think sexism is sort of the final frontier of accepted insults. There is this inequality of insults in that the NBA will fine you now for homophobic slurs or racist slurs, but the coaches themselves can make jokes about, guys need to take their skirts off and play harder. There's a lot of elements of equating being female with weakness and being female with being substandard or less than. And it's so ingrained in society that we don't even see it or recognize it, in the same way that we are now awakening ourselves to trying to lessen the amount of homophobic slurs or whatever that are just commonplace in today's society. And I think that's just representative of a much larger issue that goes beyond sports, but speaks to there being still a lot of people who want to save their own spaces and protect them from women who might come in and, I guess, ruin everything.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Sarah Spain. I mean, I think that's why I use the segregation example. And the lunch counter example was, I think it's basically saying you don't belong here in any way, whether it's having an opinion or just showing up, because of what you were born. Look, I write about politics, so I get a lot of online abuse, but nobody ever or at least that I can remember, has talked about. It's certainly not commonplace to, for
Yeah.
example, describe putting me in a sexually humiliating position. I don't get that. I don't get out. I don't get don't be here. I don't get you don't have a right to be here. And you're right. If you're going to penalize homophobia, why wouldn't you penalize gender discrimination the same way? I mean, we all know coaches, use the P word. Come on, you P's,
Yeah.
meaning insulting, meaning you're not strong, meaning you lack
Yeah.
will. So I couldn't agree with you more on all of that, Sarah Spain. And by the way, I have to say that a lot of these same commenters who attack somebody like you so viciously are also tend to be aggressively heterosexual in the way they present themselves. And I just have to say, psychologically, I have a hard time reconciling the man, I'm really straight
Yeah.
with, but I don't want to, I want to be around just guys.
Yeah. There's a lot of latent sort of homosexual undertones to a lot of sports, whether it's wanting to only be around a bunch of naked dudes and slapping butts,
Right.
or whether it's only wanting to hear from and interact with men. Or, I mean, a lot of what I get too will be, a woman will leave her job and I'll get a bunch of messages on Twitter. Oh, are you going to replace fill in the blank? You're hot enough for that job. And I'm like, oh, that's what the job's about? Oh, okay. And that's so much of it.
To be fair,
watch
Sarah,
her on TV, but put it on mute.
but to be fair, that you're hot enough, Phil Rizzuto got that a lot too.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So listen, here's something I struggle with in talking with you about this, Sarah Spain, this abuse of women, which is that it's so easy as a man to make it somehow about me. To make it about my struggle when I watched the abuse you went through, to make it about, well, but I'm not like that, I'm a good man, but you've made that point yourself about this, right? That, the one thing men can do is like not make it about them, but let you talk about you.
But what's interesting actually is I think a lot of the power of this video, unfortunately, it did what it was supposed to, but unfortunately, a lot of the power is that it's the men who are reading them and being physically and emotionally affected by them. We have seen plenty of women speak out about this issue, writing about it, talking on the radio, talking on TV. And unfortunately, I think, again, it's a larger issue in our society of women not always being believed, whether their emotions are not believed. Oh, you're overreacting, or you're getting crazy, or you're so thin-skinned, or not being believed on larger issues like 30 plus women accusing Bill Cosby of something. And It's not until we unearthed some old tape of him actually admitting to drugging someone and wanting to sleep with them that we're like, well, maybe he did do it. But those 30 plus women weren't enough. We don't believe their voices. And so in this video, I think it's a strength of it. And the reaction to it is in part because people are watching men who they assume to be strong and capable and understanding of these things to react to it so strongly. While Julie and I are very stoic and stone-faced because it's something we've heard a million times. And, it's unfortunate that that's what it takes. But at the same time, if it gets a conversation going and it makes people see that within themselves, then it's good.
Yeah, it is, but it raises that deeper question, doesn't it, Sarah Spain? And I'm not sure we're going to solve it today, but it raises that deeper question of, how do you change that situation where, let's face it, men's voices still have more authority. The fact that men are saying this is wrong and embodying in the video, which I encourage everybody to watch, as tough as it is. The fact that men are kind of embodying, oh God, I can't believe I can't even say this. The fact that, how do we change it? It seems like such a deep-seated dynamic, but then, there were equally deep-seated feelings about black people 75 years ago, or, you know what I mean? So I guess, how do you push that process along so that, other minorities, there were those feelings about Jewish people, there were those feelings about Muslim people today, so how do we push that project along? And I mean, look, I'm a radio guy, you're a sports writer, I mean, it's like, I'm not sure, like I say, I'm not sure.
Above our pay grade a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but what do you think,
It's a big issue. I mean, one thing I think is just conversation. There's a really amazing Harvard initiative, and I'm going to forget the name, but I want to say it's Project Impact, or I forget the name offhand, but essentially the goal of it is that you can take these tests and they will reveal to you a sort of subconscious implicit bias that you do not even know you have. So it's not that you are intentionally biased against certain groups of people, but it's that you deeply within you still subconsciously feel this way. And if we can continue to get people to recognize and understand their own privilege and understand their own bias, perhaps they are willing to change and they are willing to educate themselves to understand why they may have come across that way, or why their stereotypes have been so deep within them that they don't even recognize it. I mean, there's a whole movement of check your privilege. And I think, unfortunately, I've come across so many instances in my life where people don't understand and respect what I'm saying because they themselves have never been anywhere in that situation. Whether it's saying, as a woman, when it's laid out and you're walking to your car, you subconsciously put your keys between your fingers with one poking out so that if someone attacks you. Most white straight men do not have a fear of just walking at night to their car. They don't feel that inherent need. Same with women who say it's uncomfortable when they're about to walk by a construction site. They are steeling themselves for something rude to be said. And if you never experience that and it's not an everyday part of your life, it seems silly to you until you experience it over and over and over again. And eventually you're sick of walking down the street and having men continue to say to you, why don't you smile, honey?
Right.
You're like, I have nothing to smile about right now. I'm just walking down the street.
Right.
It sounds absurd. And then until you live it. And so I think we all have our own biases. We all have our own privilege. And until you check your privilege and realize it, you'll never understand what other people are trying to get to, and in terms of equality and opportunity.
I was watching a movie once with my wife where one of the key plot points was that the two characters go into a hotel room, but they don't double lock the door.
Yeah.
And she was like, I saw that right away. I was like, I totally didn't see it, because you know what I mean? That's the kind of thing you're talking about. By the way, it's Project Implicit.
That's it. Project Implicit. Yeah.
And, I think it's really important too, and I'll speak, as a white male to other white males here. I think it's really important to acknowledge we can have these biases and prejudices. It doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means we were raised in a certain environment. I mean, I'm an older white male, so I was definitely raised in a different culture and environment. It just means, we want, as good people, we want to recognize these things and deprogram ourselves from it. We don't need to hate ourselves, except that people who said these things to you, they should hate themselves. But
well, sadly, I think a lot of them do, and that's the root cause of it.
Yeah.
And in talking about the video, that's what I've said. It's like, of course, in the moment, it upsets me briefly, or it annoys me, or it frustrates me. But in the end, I love my job. I've got great friends. I'm a very happy, successful person. And I feel sorry for them because I don't know anyone in my life that would ever do that. I don't know anyone who is that deeply unfulfilled and sad. And so sometimes I'll even write that to them. I'll say, I'm sorry you're so sad. I hope you have some people in your life that make you feel good. Because I just don't think you can be a happy person, an adjusted person, and fulfilled in your own life if watching somebody else find success makes you that angry.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and I wish we could talk about this longer, but it's a great video. Thank you for doing it, and Sarah Spain, thank you for coming on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.